Welcome once again to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs, and our conversation concludes now with author A. Ashley Hoff talking about his latest publication, With Love, Mommie Dearest, the making of an unintentional camp classic.
I came to realize in the writing of this book, I came to realize that success and failure are not necessarily what we think they are. Mommie Dearest considered a critical failure, but nonetheless a financial winner. You know, we should all fail as successfully as Mommie Dearest did.
It kind of reminds me, about 6 months ago, I was in Santa Ana, and there was a reunion of the movie Midnight Madness, which was the first film that Michael J. Fox ever appeared in, and one of the very first movies that Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, was in. And there was a who's who of cast members there. The question was not who was there, but who wasn't there. And it was a fun event. It filled the entire 400-seat auditorium, a movie that was one of Disney's first PG-rated films. The name Disney was not anywhere in the film's credits. I think it was like Buena Vista was the only thing referenced to Disney. But Here it is 44 years later. This movie is still very popular. It became popular, a cult classic, when it was repeated like crazy in the mid-'80s on HBO. That's how I discovered it. And it had like Stephen Furst, who played Flounder in Animal House. It had David Naughton, the I'm a pepper, you're a pepper, be a pepper too guy. It had classic actors like John Fiedler from, Piglet and the Bob Newhart Show, Irene Tedrow, Marvin Kaplan, John Volstadt, the second Daryl of Larry, Daryl and Daryl, had a brief role and actually spoke in the film for, hey, oh, sure, Leon, right over here. He said more in that little scene than he did the entire run on Newhart. So, everybody was so friendly, and they stayed afterwards to take pictures, sign autographs, and now they're making a documentary about Midnight Madness. So just, it's amazing what originally people thought, oh, this is a flop, people are going to forget this. Sometimes those movies are more memorable than the ones that, take in millions and billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. Movies and television shows take on a life of their own. I mean, it's one of the things, Match Game, for instance, highly popular in its original run, and yet here we are, 5 decades later, and Match Game is just as popular today as it was in the 70s. And there are kids, as well as adults, who were not even born when it went off the air, who have become huge fans of it. Who knew there would be a game show channel rerunning old classic game shows? It's the same thing with a movie like Mommie Dearest. I mean, just because it received bad reviews from the critics, or it spent only a short period of time in the movie theaters, but then it got rerun to death on cable or on, the Late Show or whatever, and built up a following. People, grew up watching it in reruns and developed an affection for it or some connection to it. And you never know what kind of a second life these film and TV projects are going to take. Again, it makes you reassess your preconceived notions of what defines success or failure. And I think that's a good life lesson. It kind of gives us all hope whenever we feel like a big flop. It's kind of like, well, no, not all is lost. You never know how something's going to turn around and be either appreciated or take on a life of its own.
Oh, definitely. It was interesting, a little bit of trivia here. Xander Berkeley, who played George Mason the first 2 seasons of 24, played grown-up Christopher Crawford at the end of Mommie Dearest. And I remember watching 24 back its first couple of seasons. I was binge watching it. I didn't realize that was the same actor.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of times people will, who are known at a later date will start out doing some little bit role that is in a movie or on a TV show, and then you're watching a rerun or you're watching a movie, and all of a sudden you'll realize, oh, that's this person. And it can be kind of interesting. You can see how wild and varied people's careers can be.
Oh, definitely.
Dawn Jeffrey, who plays Vera, who is Christina Crawford's, frenemy in school, the one who later tells on her when she catches, Christina in the stable with the boy. Dawn Jeffrey had actually, around the time or a little earlier, before Mommie Dearest was filming, was doing General Hospital. She was a regular on there, and she had a storyline for about a year and a half, and ended up leaving the show just before the famous Luke and Laura wedding sequence. So it's interesting how people's careers, kind of weave in and out of so many different projects.
Yeah, and I also had a question for you. Where is the mansion that Joan Crawford lived in the film located? Was that actually her real house that she lived in back in the day?
No. The production staff had actually gone to the original house, which was in Brentwood, and at that time was owned by Anthony Newley, the famous singer-songwriter who, did Goldfinger as well as The Candyman and all these other popular songs. He was living in Joan Crawford's house in the 80s, and they took a look at the house and said, well, this isn't really going to work for filming, but they got an idea of what, life might have been like for Christina growing up, so they built the interiors in the studio at Paramount. It covered 3 separate sound stages. And then for the exteriors, the exterior front of the house is on, I think it's Amapola Drive in Bel Air. Mm-hmm. The house looked, at least as of a few years back, looked identical. I mean, I was actually driving past it one day and made the friend that was at the wheel, pull back and, circle around a second time because I realized, oh my gosh, that's the Mommie Dearest house. The back of the house with the pool was actually a separate location, and that, I can't remember off the top of my head where it is. It's in the book. That was owned by, I'm thinking it was a doctor. It was either a doctor or a dentist who had rented out the house to a number of different film and television projects because the pool and the way the back of the house looked made it an ideal filming location for certain types of scenes. So a lot of the, people who have these very lavish mansions in Bel Air or Beverly Hills or Brentwood will sometimes rent the houses out for filming just because, you can make some extra money, obviously, but also because some of these houses, the way they are designed or the way the pool house is designed makes it a perfect filming location.
Ah, definitely. And hopefully it's not, hopefully it's still there and not become some sort of McMansion, which has become a popular thing to do, unfortunately. It's interesting because I talked with Patty Berry, Jack's widow. She and Jack lived in Pacific Palisades for since 1973, and she sold the house in 2015, and a new family came in and did a nice remodel on it, and she even showed it to me. She says, doesn't this look beautiful? I said, yeah, it does. But then they flipped that house and somebody else bought it, and they tore it down. Now they're putting something else there, which is a shame because Frank Sinatra back in the day lived there with Ava Gardner. It was oftentimes called the Sinatra House, even though Old Blue Eyes only lived there for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. But for a Sinatra fan, that's long enough, and especially with Ava Gardner.
Oh, yeah.
That house witnessed a lot of history.
It did.
Probably a lot of fights, but they would have been monumental fights and monumental history.
Now I've got Phil Hartman's Frank Sinatra playing in my head.
That's funny.
Well, Ashley, it's been great talking with you. By the way, if somebody wants to buy your book or publish it, what website should we go to purchase your books?
Yes, well, either Match Game 101, A Backstage History of Match Game, or With Love, Mommie Dearest, The Making of an Unintentional Camp Classic. Both books are readily available. If they're not on the shelves at bookstores, you can order them either directly through the bookstore. You can just go up to the counter and say, "Hi, I would like to order this book." Just give them the title, the author's name, which is A. Ashley Hoff. They can look it up and they can place the order. Or, obviously, there are the usual online resources, whether barnesandnoble.com, whether it is Amazon, whether it is, and I can't remember because I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's bookseller.com.
Okay.
I can't remember off the top of my head. So
I'll check it out and see.
They have a list. It's an online platform for indie booksellers. And while we all love, Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, they've done very, very well over the years. We certainly appreciate that because they sell books. But I always tell people, when you can, support either brick and mortar, mom and pop owned, indie bookstore whenever you can, just because, keep the money local, keep the money,
definitely,
local.
Where are some local bookstores here in Southern California that you'd recommend that carry your books?
Well, there's, because I live in Los Angeles, so there's Book Soup that is in West Hollywood on the Sunset Strip. There is Skylight Books on Vermont Avenue, which is in Los Feliz. There is Stories, which is in Echo Park along Sunset Boulevard. There is Chevalier, which is a bookstore that is in Larchmont Village. And I know that there are others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. I would say just go to whatever your local neighborhood bookstore is and check with them. Again, if the book's not on the shelf, they can easily order the book for you. And it's easier to do it locally rather than, through the national chains. But I'm never going to knock anybody for using Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So.
Okay. And you've got a couple of other projects coming up. Are you at liberty to say what they are? Are you still tight-lipped about it?
Well, I'm currently working on a book. The deal is not yet final, but I've already begun work on it. And as far as I'm concerned, regardless of whether it gets picked up at this particular time or, as with the Match Game book, gets picked up at a later date by a different publisher. Let's just say it's something on a very popular movie that has kind of a cult following of its own. Different subject matter than Mommie Dearest, but at the same time, something that is easy to dismiss as, popular entertainment, whatever, but I am finding the depth in the story and hopefully shining a spotlight on some, real life issues on top of, talking about why the movie is popular.
Well, we're looking forward to that book and look forward to having you on again to talk about it when it comes out. And we've been talking with author A. Ashley Hoff, author of the books Match Game 101, which is a backstage history of Match Game, and his latest book, With Love, Mommie Dearest, The Making of an Unintentional Camp Classic. Thanks for being on, Ashley.
Thank you. I so much appreciate this.
And again, we've been speaking with A. Ashley Hoff, author of the books Match Game 101, A Backstage History of Match Game, as well as his newest book, With Love, Mommie Dearest, The Making of an Unintentional Camp Classic. And again, you can purchase it at a local mom and pop bookstore. If you're not sure where one is, you can always DuckDuckGo or Google it and check it out there. If you can go to a mom and pop, definitely do so. And until next time, this is Josh Jacobs. Keep your mind on the things above, and as you hit that open road, don't be a slowdown spectator.